So we obviously talked a little bit about Cloud9 White before the break, and with the changes, or well, half of the change, I guess. We talked about Annie Joy departing the team, but obviously she has a replacement on this roster, and there are other sort of changes happening as well. We want to take this opportunity to welcome to the show for the first time Zotek, who comes in as the new Cloud9 White head coach here, looking to take this team into a new era of prosperity and success. Hey, Reed, thanks so much for joining us, man. How are you?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Look, I think that your background and your pedigree is quite impressive here. Some people might actually not know just sort of how far you go back. So I'm curious to sort of get you to share with us what's your history been like in esports, the FPS interest, your background, and obviously because coaching I think is a very specific skill set, and a lot of people approach that from different angles, but almost everybody has like some background or yeah, again like some sort of skill set that they look to try and leverage in that craft. So tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to be where you are now.
Yeah, so I started competing, a very long time ago, back in 2002, in Age of Mythology. So it's sort of an RTS game, right? One of the classic Age of Empires spinoffs.
Fantastic.
And I was too young,
On
essentially.
PC? On console?
On
Sorry.
PC, on PC, on
Okay,
PC.
okay. I was a DS player myself.
I don't hold that against you.
Oh, I
So
remember the LAN days of Nintendo DS Age of
it was intense. It was
Mythology, Rich man.
cutthroat. Nintendogs was brutal. All right. It was absolutely brutal back then. Okay. So yeah, so Age of Mythology was where I sort of got my initiation, and I tried to compete in a WCG event, and I got two
Ooh.
rounds in when they realized I was, I think, 10 years old, and they disqualified me. And so it was kind of a bitter start to esports. But I fell in love with strategy games, and that sort of influenced everything I did after that.
Dude.
Whether go on.
No, sorry. I was just going to comment because you said you're trying to compete at World Cyber Games in 2002. I was like, holy shit, man, that was a fucking long time ago you're competing. I'm fucking 38, and I'm looking at you. You look like you're not 38. So I was like, how the fuck do you look so young?
I was at 11, I reckon.
Yeah.
Back in 02.
Yeah.
So yeah,
well,
I was 4. It's all good.
well, that's why they kicked me out. I was too young. I was way too young.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so from there, I remember back then it wasn't even a Google search. It was an AOL search. I searched strategy games through the AOL web portal and found Tactics Arena Online, which was this turn-based strategy game that meant the absolute world to me. It's still to this date
Mm.
probably my favorite game, and I just obsessed over it. And it's the first game I was able to win championships in. I won multiple Grand Slam titles in that game. This was back before everything was esports, so it was all the cash leagues,
Hmm.
right? The
Yeah,
cash
yeah, yeah.
tournaments.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and then the game died. As games do, they sort of go through cycles sometimes, and
Hmm.
that's how I got into the FPS space. My guild at the time was like, "Hey, Reed, like we're playing this game called Crossfire. Like, why don't you give it a shot?"
Was so Tactics Arena Online, was it like an RTS? Like
Uh,
an online RTS kind of thing, or
yeah, so it's a turn-based game. There's a fan remake going around out there.
is it like the Final
Tactics.torankings.com.
Fantasy Tactics games, like the sort of
Yeah,
like
very
grid
much
Or
so.
like
based
Very much
games?
so.
okay, okay.
Oh,
Very
Or
much
Heroes
so.
of Might and Magic, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, very
how did
much
I
so.
never
Very
know
much
about
so.
this? Holy
It's a
moly! I would have
classic.
played
It
the shit
was
out of that.
it was the
You
biggest
just
game on
opened a
Addicting
door for
Games.
Uber. He just fucking loves these type of
I'll
fucking
I'll link
games.
you
Fucking
after,
really
man.
love these
I'll
kind
link
of
you
games.
after.
Yeah.
There's still a scene, a couple hundred people going at it.
Yeah, and now you talk about Crossfire as well, Zotek. And I think when I was like actually googling up your name in Crossfire, I think you have like a fan page of like 27,000 likes, followers.
Mhm.
You probably apparently made a mark as well within the scene because some aspiring pros were looking up to you of like how to use the AK into like the FPS genre. So how'd you go about to translate that skill set from Age of Mythology and RTS over to an FPS and be dominant in that as well?
Yeah, so when I started, I was terrible. I was, you see the jokes of people like spraying at people's knee. I was a kneecap shooter when I started, and I'd never struggled with games before, right? It had always come easy to me with strategy
Mhm.
games, whether it was chess or Age of Mythology or Tactics. It was it came easy to me. And when I started playing FPS games, suddenly it wasn't easy.
Mm.
And so, I was addicted, of course, because it was I was terrible, so I had to get better. Um, and yeah, that's when I started really getting into the aspects of learning the game and understanding how do you improve at something, how do you help people improve, how do you how do you lead teams effectively? Um, because I was so bad that I couldn't rely on just being talented. I had to kind of dissect the game and figure out how do I get better at something when, I'm 17 I started at 17 in the
Hmm.
FPS space. And that's, it's kind of old for people to start playing FPS games sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I kind of had to use every trick I could to learn and improve. So fast forward a year after I started, I had my breakout game, and not WCG, WCA, because they got bought
Hmm.
out. So it
Yeah.
kind of was it was kind of bittersweet for me to like go back and be like, all right, I'm ready to compete now in a different game. Uh, but yeah, so
You're right there.
I had a breakout year. I was this opper at the time. I didn't use the AK yet. I was an opper,
Hmm.
and a year after that, I was playing in the pro league.
Okay. And this naturally transition over to you switching over to CS:GO. But what I actually find it very interesting too is like the way you're approaching these games or the way you're explaining your career. It always seems like you always wanted to look into like wanting to help people out. So is this like just a natural transition to be like, oh, I just want to start coaching ever since you went into like the FPS genre? Because again, at 17 and 18, yes, maybe a little bit too young to start like the pro path. I don't think so. I think it's a great age to start. But I also think that now, if you're still at a very young age, but already looking at the coaching aspect of it, was it always something that was behind your mind, just to be like, I want to just dissect and try to lead a team from like the bench more than just trying to lead a team with your fragging ability?
Yeah, so I was an IGL for 6 years, I think, in Crossfire.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I think it really started just wanting to help people and trying to. I feel like you owe an obligation as someone who's successful in esports to help people not reach your level if you're competing because you want to keep you want to be better, right? You want to be
Yes,
better,
of course.
but you sort of owe it to give back to the community and to help build people up. And I felt that very strongly even early on. So if you ever go through my old YouTube videos, a lot of my more popular videos are the ones I've made showing people strategies or how to deal with a mental game or how to maximize their improvement. And these are things that made it easier to transition into coaching, but I don't think it was my goal starting off. No. Uh,
Mm,
I kind of view them as separate endeavors entirely because as a competitor, you have very different goals versus as a coach.
mm,
Just obviously here, just seeing some of your content, obviously
Mhm.
on YouTube. I kind of want to angle a little bit more into sort of how you started to get into the academic side, I guess, of esports. And we talk about starting as an IGL and wanting to help people. Like a lot of your like a lot of your posts and stuff like that talk about like the kind of literature you're trying to consume and sort of the books that you're recommending and stuff like that. So I'm kind of curious about like sort of um what switched you on to start going behind the scene and talking much more about the mental game, right? That was actually one of the videos that we were sort of showing there, because a lot of your suggestions here, and you say like your biggest influences about books, a lot of these are talking about the mental side of playing it and competing, and I think it's something that's not very thoroughly explored, especially in Valorant to
mhm.
date. So I'd love to know like how these have sort of benefited you as a competitor, and so maybe what the other takeaways for other people that are wondering about what resources they could consume to improve their mental game specifically.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head where there's sort of this lack of knowledge and even just energy put into it into handling the mental game, and yet it's something that everything comes from the mind, right? Where we don't play a sport where if you're 7 foot tall, like it's not going to help you in esports, right? It's entirely mental, and even in all athletics, the mental game is massively important. So yeah, it's something that we don't have enough focus on. I got into it early on, and it's kind of how I even transitioned into Valorant as a funny story we can get into later, I guess. But yeah, it's something I got into early on when I was becoming an IGL because my first conception, as an 18-year-old kid who's never IGL, never even played FPS games before, and you're trying to lead a team, you realize very quickly that there's way more to being an IGL and being a leader on a team than just being didactic and saying this is what you have to do. This is the strategy we're going to run. Peak this, do that. And I wasn't very good at those things. So naturally, I looked to other sports. I looked to tennis, I looked to golf, I looked to baseball, to piano playing, to every sort of competitive and cutthroat endeavor out there to see what I could learn. Josh Waitzkin, you mentioned books that people could consume. The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin is a fantastic, phenomenal book. A guy who he was a world chess champion and retired from chess and then became a martial arts world champion. And it's sort of his approach to learning and the mental side of performance. And there are tons of aspects like that and stories and people you can learn from in every sport. And I think if you want to succeed, especially if you think like you're not a good leader or you're trying to push yourself, even not as an IGL, but just as a team captain or a powerful force within your team, you're sort of doing yourself a disservice if you don't look to other people who've done it before you.
I love that you brought up sort of tennis and the mental game behind that because I think that's what, as a young competitor, playing tennis was where my lack of mental fortitude was laid bare,
Oh no.
especially in singles. Oh yeah, I mean, I was like a little mini John McEnroe there. But looking back on it, I have to respect tennis players for their ability to maintain and sort of build up that sort of mental toughness because I didn't have it as a kind of younger person,
Mhm.
or the discipline to go along with it here. So think about these resources now. I
Still
don't know about
breaking
you,
golf
Mitch, man,
clubs
but I
today.
kind of wish I fucking read a few more of these books in my younger years. Give a
Listen,
break.
maybe that pro Rocket League career would have went better for me, but there's always the next esport. Speaking of
Uh-huh.
that, jumping
I
jumping from one
believe.
esport to oh yeah, I'm glad I've got your seal
Looking
of
like a
approval
true
on that one. Let's
shoutcaster,
go.
by the way. There's always the next game.
I can't wait to hear the next line. And Luke scores a goal just like that.
And it's the flip reset for the it's gonna be amazing.
Perfect.
But yeah, so I'm thinking like CS:GO, right? That's a
Yeah.
game I can understand. It's where I come from, and I made the leap to Valorant. Pretty much day one. I was playing the beta, the alpha when I got a key. God damn, it took a while to get a key, but yeah, like I was in there day one. It was still a lot. It was still a lot to learn, and as new agents came out and stuff. What is it like for you jumping from CS to Valorant? How has that journey been like picking up all the different agents and now as the game expands even further and further, we got another map coming, maybe an expansion of the map pool further down the line. Who knows? I feel like it's one of the more difficult games to jump into from my perspective, but how do you feel on it?
Yeah, so to be clear, I never competed professionally at Counter-Strike. It was sort of
Hmm.
after I retired from Crossfire, I competed at like the advanced level of
Mhm.
CS just casually with some friends,
Yeah.
but I never competed professionally at it. But ironically, when I first started coaching Valorant, I hadn't really played the game very much.
Hmm.
Um, I was good friends with the sports psychologist from the Sonics. Um, yeah, you can see there's the first time I ever played the beta. Uh, um,
Hmm.
but after the beta, I hadn't played it really at all. I was playing Counter Strike, and I'm good friends with the uh, the former sports psychologist of the Susquehanna Sonics. And when they were looking for a coach at the time, I was coaching an Egyptian Crossfire team.
Mhm.
Now I'm very very happy to see them succeed after I've left. When I joined them, they were at the bottom of they were sort of the second best team in Egypt, and now currently they're the number one team in the pro league for all of Europe. So
Ooh,
it was
nice.
really
Which team
really
was
good
that?
journey for us to have together. Anubis
Adibus.
Esports,
Yeah.
Oh,
Anubis,
Anubis. Oh,
Yeah.
sick.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, those guys are great.
So yeah, so I was coaching them at the time for Crossfire, and they wanted me to transition to Valorant, and I was like, like I don't know if I want to go out to I don't know if I want to move out to Egypt right now. It's there's a whole pandemic going on, and as I was having those dialogues, uh, Michelle, who the sports psychologist with Sonics, she reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're looking for a coach in Philadelphia. Would you be interested? I know you don't have a lot of experience in Val." And yeah, I talked to the players. They had the mentality I look for when I approach a team to see if I'm a good fit to coach them. And the rest is kind of history. We ended up unfortunately falling one round short in VCT. It killed me. It still kills me,
Mm.
but it's I'll work that nightmare off in therapy a decade or so down the line, I'm sure.
I know what
Wait,
that's
It'll
like.
eventually.
that was also like an era where you guys almost qualified, where it was still was it still Miniature and Jason in your roster? And
Yeah, it
I think you
was.
guys are probably the first roster that I was looking at in North America that was already playing like Ascent with no duelist, and you had like a Chamber and KO in there. So that was actually already looking at changing the
curve.
meta and being ahead of the curve before now we're starting to see like a lot of these like triple initiator, barely any duelists or whatever is going on in a sense. So good work put into that. I know you guys have been pretty close to qualifying from like a 13-1 loss on split against Sentinels when the debut started to almost qualifying for VCTs. I mean, it's still a great improvement. I want to take a side question actually that makes no sense with all these questions, because I was casting the Red Bull Campus Clutch last summer, right? And it was actually the Egyptian team out there.
Anubis. Yeah, the
exactly.
huge comeback, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm casting and I'm calling him Anubis, right? But everybody in chat in my DMs are saying it's Anubis, Anubis, Anubis. Is it Anubis or Anubis? Somebody tell me how to.
Anubis.
There you go. Thank you. Now I made it clear. That's all I had to say.
This was Van Silly.
I mean, it depends on where you're from.
Everybody that messaged him. This was. He wanted to call them out right now. Let me just prove it to all you motherfuckers.
Yeah.
I was
get
right
on chat.
That's actually the whole reason they invited me on. Van Silly just had to get back at everyone. This is his
we
playing 4D chess.
Exactly.
He said if it's Anubis, don't fucking bring him. Just tell him we don't want it. We're booked them.
I wondered why you asked me that before you sent me the invite. It's crazy.
That's why we said we might have a slot, and then we were like, yeah, actually that slot opened
makes
up.
Sense.
We opened up. We opened up.
I'm kind of curious. I think like we didn't skip it, but obviously we talked about your transition to Sonics, but I'm kind of curious about like the actual transition to Valorant, right? First of all, what made you sort of want to do it, right? We saw that tweet. I guess I should start learning Valorant, right? What was the motivation there, and like what were your first impressions? Because he made this tweet. He actually showed it where he sort of said that like these agents' abilities aren't actually just utility, and people are really underselling this. So I'd love to know like kind of the way you viewed the game when you sort of came in, and sort of how you felt it compared to a game like Counter-Strike, which you put in a lot of hours.
Yeah, so too many hours. Many hours in the 2 years I played it. So I think that when I came in, I was in a very lucky position that I had top level FPS experience in Crossfire for years and years and years, and Valorant's very similar to Crossfire mechanically. So I was able to bring in sort of a fresh strategic take, without sort of having, because a lot of the players who are the best in the world right now, even a lot of the coaches, have been playing since beta, right? And no matter how hard you try, you're always going to have a little bit of sort of social inertia or idea inertia maintaining the status quo. And so I think that was a huge advantage coming in sort of with the fresh take, and a disadvantage at times. There were times I would say something and the players on the Sonics would be like, "Are you sure, man? Like I don't think that's how that works." I was like, "Oh, my bad." But yeah, so the way I view the game, like with utility, is I think that everything can be broken down into like a mechanical aspect, and then very simple, like you want very simple flexibility around that. So for me, something I've said for years and years is that if you could have a choice to be the smartest player in the world or the best mechanical player in the world, you'd pick the best mechanics every single time. And that's true for most games out there. Short of like chess, I suppose. It's true for almost every game that the mechanics are what decides success. And so when I look at utility, I don't think of it as just from like a strategic macro POV, like, oh, what can this? So the chamber teleport's a great example. When he first came out, a lot of coaches I would talk to were like, we don't see it. He's hard to synergize with. His trips are okay, but you can't really do a ton off of them. His teleport's okay, but there's not really a lot of pre-round places to TP to. And I was just thinking of it from the tactical individual POV, like, what do you mean? Like, this is a jet dash you can use 7 times around. Like that was my whole take on it. And that's been similar for a lot of different agents. Yoru's the one. Yoru, fingers crossed, Yoru stocks rising. I think he'll be kind of seeing a bit of a resurgence on maps like Haven, Ascend, in the coming months.
Yeah. I could see that when you're talking about Yoru, because again, maybe when we're using the example of like the FPX Fnatic on Icebox, it wasn't the best, but like how FPX was using it, Yoru on Breeze was actually quite nice, where the timing with the TP is also timing with the flashes. So once you land down the mechanics of the timing of putting your TP, flashing, and getting a decoy out when it's getting shot, and then TPing towards it, so that you actually break crosshair placement on your opponents to get kills. I think you're going to start seeing a lot of good space creation with a Euro itself. But That said, I mean, let's pivot then over to Sonic's over to Cloud9 White now. How did that transition come about? Like, where was like the end of the era for yourself with Sonics, and how did the conversation start with Cloud9 White?
Yeah, so with the Sonics things, so post VCT1, we had that, sort of the underdog comeback.
Yes,
We were ranked
yes,
like 30th going into VCT. We were ranked 10th is where we peaked, right? So we
yep.
ended up being 10th in an A at our peak in there. Kind of sad to see it spiraling down a bit right now, but I think they'll be able to recover.
Hmm.
Getting fingers crossed. Um, but yeah, so when that ended, we had a lot of dialogues about what we needed to do moving forward, and at the end of the day, the organization wanted to go in kind of a different direction.
Mm,
Um, and so that's where I ended up stepping down, and then very shortly after, Jason stepped down, and very shortly after that, Bob stepped down. So it
hmm,
was
hmm,
it was a very quick and rapid deterioration, I suppose. I stayed on for
hmm,
a couple of extra weeks, to help them vet new coaches. I still support the org, still support the players. I think they're great guys. Uh, but yeah, it was just a different direction, Sonics.
mm,
So then from there, I was still uh, I was still kind of in the midst of what I was going to do. I had a couple of offers in the collegiate scene to go to from the coaching perspective. A couple of offers for professional teams who were interested in trialing. But of all the people I talked to, the ones who I sort of resonated with the most were Cloud9 White. Mostly because when I go to join a team, I don't, you know, I don't want to work with a team that just is like that enjoys competing, right? To me, there's like a big difference between people who enjoy competing and people who are competitors. So, not name too many names, but the Sentinels are a great example where it's very obvious that they have people on their team who enjoy competing, who love competing, but aren't like really competitors in the sense of they want to sacrifice everything to be the best.
hmm.
And I think that there are a lot of teams who have players like that. And when I spoke with Cloud9 and I talked one on one with all the players, there is that hunger there to not just be the best female team, but to be the best. And they
Hmm.
want to be competitive tier one players across the board. And that's what drew me here.
Awesome.
So, I mean, we've interviewed multiple personnel from Cloud9 before. I mean, Mitch, you can
Mhm.
probably even speak to this as well. We've had, God, I mean, probably every Cloud9 coach I think on the show by now. And Mitch, I don't know about you, but it always seems like there's a strong system there, right? Across all their games, not just Valorant.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess a lot of that comes down then to like your interview process, your hiring, like when you're getting involved with them, what's like what's the process of like Cloud9 reach out, they say, "Hey, we're interested." Is it a lengthy trial like you're going into a team that already has a lot of success? I imagine that's something they're also kind of like you want to guard the secret formula, right? You don't want to let too many chefs in the kitchen. So, how did that one come about?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the overarching process, right? I'm fairly new here, but how it worked with me is that um so I had sort of reached out to a couple of teams that I'd heard good things about, and when I did that, Izzy Nuki from Cloud9, she's one of their
Yep.
team managers,
Yep.
reached back out to me and said, "Hey, we saw that you were potentially looking for a coaching position. Would you be interested in hopping on and talking to the players and seeing if we're a good fit?" So I had an interview with her. I worked one on one with their coach, the other coach of Cloud9, Moonchopper. I had interviews with him, and then for my own self, I like to sit down with all the players one on one before I commit to a team and see what their goals are to see if there's alignment there because
Mm,
I don't want to waste their time if we're not a good fit, right? Like I
hmm.
don't want to come in and say like,
Sure.
okay, we're gonna do X and Y and Z, and then no one's on board. Like that's not gonna get us anywhere. Um, so yeah, it's really important on my end that we align there. So I talked with all the players, and then yeah, shortly before VCT, their first VCT run this year, I came on for about, or I guess the most recent VCT run. I came on for about a week before VCT. I helped prepare for that, and we ended up making day two, which was good. It was the first VCT we'd done that in a while, but fell short ultimately. I think. Oh man, if you look at the VLR pay, it was brutal. Like the get, especially like we lost the girl kissers 2-0 the first time, and then the second time, I think we lost by like one round to Dark Zero. Like Mel, it was so tragic. It was like a 13-11 loss. oh, again, heartbreak.
Yeah.
So it was, but yeah, so we saw some improvements, and then, uh, yeah, a couple of weeks later, we finalized the details.
So Roy was sleeping on the couch at that point after that match between Cloud9
You
White
know,
and Trail
I
Kissers.
that if it were me and I was competing against like my girlfriend, like it'd be GG, it'd be over, game over.
That's why he's praying to
I
God
I
his
can't,
teammates are stepping up.
yeah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. There'd be too much residual.
No, for
But
sure.
yeah, it's I do think though, I think that's one of the hardest things, and it's a testament. I'm really glad they have that because
Mhm.
it's hard if you're a competitor to date and have regular relationships sometimes, not just to
Yeah.
travel, but it's hard for people not in esports to understand, what do you mean you're giving me 100% of your free time? We only hung out for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my free time. I don't know what to tell you.
And that's exactly actually what I wanted to get to because earlier in the show we were talking about Annie Dro leaving the roster most
Mhm.
recently, and she was mentioning how she likes the content creation, but there's also a lot of work that has to be put into practice. So when you actually join Cloud9 White and you're going through the processes of like what's the training regimen for the team, is it something that you're trying to evolve for the team right now so that not everybody feels overworked, or is it something that is already implemented that you're just following ahead? What's your vision there for the preparation with Cloud9?
Yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about wanting to be the best at something is that it's not complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's
Mm-hmm.
you put in the right amount of time in the right ways. And that sounds like a non-answer, but it really is that simple, which is that if being the best and improving is your number one priority, then that's all you need to do. Everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah.
The details are exactly that. They're details. So for me, right now, one of the big things that we kind of want to do since we're in this transition phase, you mentioned Annie just left, and
Yeah.
we signed Bob, who
Yeah.
I got to work with on the Sonics as well.
Exactly.
So, uh, but yeah, so whenever you're in this transition phase, it's more about rebuilding those sort of fundamentals, making sure you have a strategic base to sort of play off of, more so than working on like, you know, how are you getting the most value out of the death matches you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance, your aim labs training routine versus your in-game unrateds that you play to try new ideas, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's less of a focus right now than getting the team all sort of on the same page. But yeah, that's a huge component.
You said that obviously you like to meet with players one to one and kind of just try and find out if you're
Mhm.
aligned or you kind of have the overarching goal, right? I think like those goals can be really determined by values, and that those are the real things that underpin, I guess, any sort of cooperative venture. So I kind of
Mhm.
want to know, like, um, how how do you define success in, let's say, like the first 6 months of your tenure for this team? Like, what is the goal? Obviously there's some fairly obvious components to that answer, but I'm curious to see like to what degree, what it was that sort of pushed you over the edge and said, yeah, this is a team I want to commit to, and yeah, like we're on board, we've got our goals lining up. Like, can you give any insight into sort of how you decided this was where you wanted to be going forward? Because it's not just commitment from the team side, but also you.
Yeah, well, my friend Jordan kind of made fun of me. He's like, "You realize it's a lose-lose read, right?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, they're the best. So if they keep winning, it's not you. It's not on you. And if they lose, it's all your fault." So it's yeah. So and it kind of that kind of highlights where my thoughts were. Where I was like, well, at the end of the day, and I'm sure you've heard this time and time again whenever you've had people from Cloud9 White on, game changers isn't the goal. That's a
Yeah.
byproduct of being the best female team, but it's never the focus. The
Mm.
focus is to be as good as possible. And it's one of the things where for me that's always my goal in any team I'm in, which
Mhm.
is I want to push us as far as we can possibly go. That's just as true now as it was when I was a player. Like the thing about having it like I don't know, a ranking or a trophy as a goal is that it's sort of ephemeral, right? Like you either
Yeah.
get it and then you're satisfied and you're done,
A little
right?
arbitrary. Yeah.
Yeah, or you get it and you keep pushing, and it's like, okay, well, so what are you really trying to do? And yeah, the answer is we're trying to be as good as we possibly can.
Mhm.
And when I talked with everyone one on one, that's a big thing I look out for because a lot of people, I mentioned earlier that some people are in it because they enjoy competing, but I really look for people who are competitors, people who are willing to prioritize competition, and people who are willing to not just sort of put in the token effort to not, and I don't mean to say token effort because it still is work, right? But there's a
Mhm.
difference between people who, there's a difference between people who end up being professionals at a game and people who end up being dominant or consistently good for a long period of time at a game. And those are the people who I like to align, more so than, people who are just professionals, so to speak.
Mm.
So before we move on to kind of the end of this year, I want to jump even further ahead and ask sort of what the lay of the land looks like right now coming into next year for you guys. Obviously, it's a big thing for us having like franchising coming up as casters. It's the next year is a big question mark, and we've got some answers and some that spur on more questions. But for you guys now, what is the franchise outlook looking like? Do you expect that Cloud9 White will be there?
We'll see. I don't really know all the details that have been codified yet, but we'll see. Like I said, our main focus is being as, and this sounds like a bit of a non-answer,
Yeah, it's the
but
one step.
it's
Right.
our goal is to be as good as we possibly can. The
Mm,
franchising side of things will take care of itself.
yeah.
If what that means is if 6 months from now we're the best Cloud9 roster, so be it. But that's
Okay.
that's that's the sort of the technicality, detail-oriented side of things. We're just focused on
Yeah.
getting better.
I
Mhm.
like that. So it really is like keep the players' head in the game, keep the even coaches and so on in the game. Who cares about, what's ahead of us in the road? We're not there yet, right? Like that's
Mhm.
further down. Deal with it when it comes here.
Yeah, day to day, day to day.
Yeah.
Mm.
At least we get into like wanting to be the best, which of course we know Cloud9 White currently is the best in North America. And again, taking a step back into what we talked about earlier in our show, the amount of slots that are available for the Game Changers Berlin LAN at the end of the year. For me, am I a little bit too narrow minded to think that 8 teams is okay? Just because again, my train of thought is because if Brazil only has one spot, most naturally it's going to go to Team Liquid because they've been dominating that region. Cloud9 White,
Sure.
Shopify Rebellion to top two in North America. EMEA for me, probably G2 is the first. Anybody is a second place. So
Mhm.
do you agree that there should only be 8 spots to start? Should there be more? How do you find this competition low down?
So I think it depends on the sort of the goal of Game Changers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the goal of Game Changers is sort of inclusivity, right? And it's shown that it's massive. There's a
Yep.
reason that there are so many more girl players in Valorant than in other esport titles, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's it's because of the inclusivity aspect. And as time goes on, once those numbers stop being, 90% guys, 10% girls, you'll start seeing girls play way more often at the top level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it kind of depends on Riot's goal. If they want just to find the absolute best female team, and that's the purpose of the event, then yeah, I think that 8 doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're doing it, they want to find the best team and maximize that inclusivity aspect, well then more teams is kind of better, right? You get more experience, more exposure. Um, so it just depends on the goals of what Riot has in mind.
Had my
Um,
mic muted. Let me ask you a question real quick. Just on
It was
that.
intentional.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
intentional.
yeah, it was a little moment of silence, a little bit of anticipation build up. And now my question. So, for from my perspective, listening to you talk through that, um, I'm sort of I'm sort of scratching my head a little bit about the Cloud9. I'm sorry, after the mic thing, I've completely blanked on the way through that sentence. I'll think of it in a minute. There was a follow up to something you directly said. I can't even. My brain's just stopped.
We were
working
talking about Game
altogether.
Changers, 8 spots, Ride's vision if they want it more, depending on
It was
how
it
much
was
you want to
it was
include.
something about. Oh, that's what it was. Fuck yes. All right. The word Mimi just came back
Mhm.
into my head and reminded me. So Mimi back in CS:GO was one of the first players. I don't want to say the first because I don't know that for certain. I know in Asia and Southeast Asia, it's been a thing with like
Mhm.
integrated rosters before. But
Mhm.
Mimi in Europe was like one of the big headlines because she was a top player. She jumped in CS over to a mixed team and was competing in the main leagues, and that was amazing. In Valorant, I've heard, I mean, even back when I was talking to a few players back in like alpha, beta, before Game Changers had really like kicked off to the level it's at now, and they had said that they had trialed for teams and they had heard like, oh no, sorry, guys don't want to play with a girl, unlucky, and like all this sort of BS. But that was way, way back. That's like CS days, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Sure.
I'm wondering, maybe you won't even be able to give an answer to this, but how do you think that we're close now? Do you think Game Changers, first of all, is so far, meeting its goal? From what you've already said, I think yes, like it's promoting female scene and so on. But do you think we'll get a mixed team in the VCT in the main leagues within, what kind of time frame do you think we're talking about there?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is it's like a statistics game, right?
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that I always think of the chess comparison, where in chess, if you look at the average rating of players, guys versus girls are on average higher rating.
Hmm.
It's like, well, wait a sec, but the top 100 players are all guys, or not all guys, but mostly guys, overwhelmingly guys. So what the hell, right? And it's a representation issue. If 95% of your player base is men, then naturally the top slots are all going to be filled by men. So I think that while yes, you may see players, female players who have that skill getting tryouts and opportunities, I know that several of them have already on co-ed teams. Famously Potter, right? She had some
Yeah.
success with Evil Geniuses.
Mhm.
But I think that until you have that sort of that balance between the two sexes in terms of just the numerical representation, it's not going to be a consistent thing just because
Mhm.
it statistically can't be, right? There's always going to be that dominance at the top if there's a big disparity in the player base. It's just how it's just the numbers game.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't. So, and that's where you ask if Riot's achieving their goals. I think, yeah, I think it's done a fantastic job promoting women in esports and promoting women in the competitive scene. But are they done yet? No, there's still a lot further to go to equalize things.
Mhm. Mhm. And even then, like in North America here, as we saw the screenshot before, not only Potter, but we also had Claudia, right? That's been part of like that first iteration of trying to have
That's
a
right,
co-ed team,
yeah.
where
GG.
Claudia went over to CLG, and I think she's playing over there right now. And then even SQ yourselves, you guys had Bob in the
Yeah.
roster before too. Now Bob is somebody you recently picked up, so let's talk about that roster, right? Because C9 dominantly, C9 White, #1 team in North America, potentially #1 team in the world. Everybody praised of how good Annie Dro is. And what I like about this is that if you're looking from a holistic or an outside perspective, you're basically going for a Silva to another Silva, right? So you lose Annie Dro, you bring in Bob. Bob has had a lot of success playing a Silva before with SQ, and also I think even went into a deeper agent pool. Now, are there a lot of similarities between these two players, knowing how Annie Joe played before, and of course you coaching Bob at the same time, or is there something more that Bob brings into the roster that's going to propulse C9 White to even more higher lengths and victories?
Yeah, I mean, Bob's the best female player in the world, so
Nice.
that's
Plain and simple.
you know, anytime you take the best person in the world at something and bring them into a team, there's going to be an upgrade, right?
Hmm.
And it's we were incredibly lucky that as Annie stepped down to focus more on content creation,
Yes.
Bob was there as a pickup, and that I had, I sort of was able to talk to her, and she trialed for a bunch of other teams as well,
Hmm.
and she decided Cloud9 was the team for her.
Hmm.
So we were very lucky to have her, very very lucky. The stars definitely aligned on that. As for their play styles, Annie was always from the time I trialed. I'm speaking from a very limited time
Yeah,
space,
yeah,
so
yeah,
keep that in
yeah.
mind.
Of course.
But Annie was always she was one of the older players on the team. She was always a voice of maturity. She was able to bring sort of that calming presence to the team in a lot of ways and to bring some positivity in matches. From what I saw, especially during the VCT run I was there for. Um, and I think Bob being the IGL of Sonics, when she comes in, it really it
Ooh.
really allows for that sort of to be made up.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so I think she adds that dynamic, but to a different level. It also it takes some of the work off of Mel's plate
Yeah, yeah,
as an
yeah.
IGL, where
Yeah.
anytime you have that secondary voice to where you can say like you can call a strat, and then you know that you can focus on your individual play as the other side of the map is taken care of, right? There's
Hmm.
that voice, that active voice on the other side of the map. It helps you a lot.
Hmm. Hmm. Dude, that's awesome. So then now it's going to have to be that type of synergy now to have a double IGL for the team, a better synergy, less clashes, hopefully
Well, I
no
wouldn't say double
clashes.
IGL.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say double
Okay. Okay.
IGL, but just that
Okay.
second voice in the
Yeah.
team
Okay.
is
Okay.
really
Okay.
big. And that
Okay.
those voices were already there, which is why this is such a good impact. So Alexis, she's been a
Hmm.
fantastic voice on the team. Um, and so now you have it was just a very it was good that with the biggest things Annie brought to the team, Bob is also able to provide. So
Okay.
we're not losing a lot in the vocal department, which is really
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
Let's cast our minds ahead, obviously, because it's an exciting time, I think, in the game changers world, right? A time where not only are you
Mhm.
preparing your team to compete domestically and qualify for the game changers land, obviously, is that's been a concern for many rosters, but also looking at the international competition. Bit of an all-encompassing question here, but I'd love to know like who you're looking out for, and I guess some of the hallmarks of good preparation for an international land, one where you're walking into a meta game that might be different, or at least you know less, I guess, expected opponents and strategy you're going up against. Like obviously you have to scout for that and look at a lot of
Yeah.
region specific trends. I'd love to know like what the process is right now for getting this team ship shape for international success.
Yeah, so one of the things that will be really interesting to see, because while we're confident on a team to team basis,
Hmm.
is the Brazilian teams. I think that Brazil has an incredibly strong culture across all of their esports titles of LAN events. They are very much a LAN first region.
Hmm.
And that provides them a pretty big advantage in any international event, because pretty much every Brazilian team has more LAN experience than pretty much every North American team.
Yeah,
That's just a given. And that's been true for Counter Strike. That was true for Crossfire. That was true for presumably Valorant. I can't speak to exactly what Team Liquid's been doing, but I imagine it's much the same there. So that's interesting. And then G2 goes in, they'll have home field advantage, right? They've been based in Berlin for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think those are interesting dynamics to think of from a storyline perspective. But from a preparation perspective, at the end of the day, it's all about us, and we're more worried about the co-ed scene. We're competing against the co-ed
sure.
teams. That's our as much as it would be nice from the storyline perspective to be like, oh, we're terrified of like G2 goes and that'll be a great game. We're not really. And hopefully they surprise us and can give us a good game. We're going to be as prepared as humanly possible. But good luck.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, you guys have to sort of split your focus a little bit, or rather, it actually sounds like the what is maybe the highest priority right now is competing against these co-ed teams, and the
Mhm.
game changers teams need to give you guys maybe a reason to spend a little bit more time, sort of
Not to
giving.
say, not to say that we won't be prepared. This last game changers, there was an immense amount of preparation that went into each of the teams, to a point where, at times we were a bit disappointed where a team would not have any more depth than what we saw. And, we can look back to the notes and you just see sort of sad emojis in the, in the notes, like, oh, they did the B strat again. Okay. Like, it's like, so yeah, it's there still will be that intense level of preparation. You can't take, no matter what level of team you're playing against, you can't take, whether it's the best team in the world or if it's, a tier 50 team, you have
Mhm.
to take them seriously
Yeah.
when everything's on the line.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
sense. You guys just have a lot on your plate because you're competing in multiple scenes, and
Yeah,
competitions. So, but I guess you can the approach can maybe stay unified between those two. Your preparation for the co-ed scene is analogous
exactly.
to sort of game changes as well. So, Tech mate, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the show. I'm really pretty excited about this Cloud9 White team because you're right. Your mate was right. You have it's a difficult situation to come into where you know, it's incumbent upon you to continue this winning streak. And the
Yeah.
impact, I guess, of your coaching will be harder to see because how much headroom, like how far can you take this team? So
Yeah.
again, my best wishes and obviously good luck for your roster, man. And I'm sure Vans Mitch agree with me. I can't wait to see what heights you take this team to next.
Exactly, because and just to add real quickly too, because I think
Thank
also
you.
for Cloud9 White, the only team that's really taken out a map from them within the Game Changers is Shopify Rebellion. Outside of that,
Mhm.
I think it's always been 2-0. And you talk about the amount of preparation that goes into a lot of these Game Changers. There's one coming up right now at the end of July or end mid July, sorry, for the tournament itself. So I'm hoping the competition is going to get a lot better and none of those. Oh no, they're doing the B strat again, as you mentioned again. So yeah, best of luck for that for sure, Zotek.
Yeah, nothing would make us happier than seeing the entire female scene be played at a much higher level.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're contributing, I think, as well by setting the standards. So Zotek, thanks for coming on the show, man. Great to talk with you, and obviously good luck going forward in game changes and of course in co-ed competitions.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.